Hi, and welcome back, everyone, to the Integrative Women's Health Podcast. I'm thrilled to be here with my guest, Shefaly Ravula. I'm your host, Dr. Jessica Drummond, and we're going to get into bowel health. Shefaly is a PA with a specialist in GI function. So obviously you work a lot with SIBO and IBS. So what brought you to that subspecialty? What's kind of the story behind your career?
Yeah, it's a circuitous path. I actually started, believe it or not, out of grad school at a young age, went straight to critical care, bone marrow transplant for a few years. So got a lot of good, in-house hospital care, critical care skills kind of, that was really great. But so I didn't get into gut health in the way that I do it now. Except for the fact that I got my next job as a PA in a GI office. So very conventional gastro office, worked there for years off and on. And then when I did get away from it for a while, I was a stay-at-home mom for a while, and I started a culinary business, culinary instruction, food writing, that kind of thing. And then I was like, I need to bring that back to GI. Obviously, food and gut go hand in hand. And so got training in functional medicine, got a lot of training in nutrition, and kind of all at the same time. Honestly, there was a lot of overlap, and went back to conventional GI thinking, let me bring what I've learned to back to the conventional practice. And it just was really difficult to bring in everything that I wanted to in a conventional setting, the culinary piece, the holistic piece, the integrative piece, the functional piece, like hard to do in a 15-minute visit. So there is another sort of parallel side of things that really got me into functional medicine and nutrition. And that was my dad's heart health. And so I ended up learning a lot about cardiometabolic health parallel to this. And so I started this practice as precision metabolic health, but it was really broad. I was doing a lot of things. I was doing a lot of metabolic work and perimenopause, andropause, gut health, all of it. And so we kind of narrowed it down to gut health just a year ago, which I still do all of those other things, but I really hone in on the gut first. And I really like to bridge that gap of conventional GI to this GI. I think there's a real need for it. So a lot of our referrals are from conventional GI.
That makes a lot of sense. And, similarly, I worked in conventional medicine for a long time and then brought it back. And it was well received, and it was a little bit easier to do in pelvic health, because in pelvic health and physical therapy, people do have more time with their patients, but there's still kind of too much to do because you're trying to do manual therapy techniques. And I'm sure the GI physicians were trying to do, procedures and medication management. And one of the things that I've noticed through my career, particularly around gut health and nutrition, is like 15, 20 years ago when I was doing this, making simpler changes to nutrition and lifestyle had larger impacts on complex chronic illness. And I feel like the illnesses were honestly a little bit less complex. In your experience, especially when it comes to gut health, one of the challenges I see is that people are on such restrictive diets that it's actually problematic, but they also really have challenges with expanding those diets, even physiologically. So talk a little bit about, from a gut perspective, how that nutrition and complexity and digestive health has evolved over your career.
Well, I think just being now, we may have known in our training about the gut-brain axis and the parasympathetic versus sympathetic nervous system and how it puts us into fight or flight mode, even when we're eating, or even when thinking about eating in some of these patients. But because that is a little bit more mainstream now I think it's a little easier to teach it and preach it, and people will listen to it and actually do the things. Whereas before, it probably sounded like woo-woo medicine,
Yeah. Yeah.
One of my favorite tools to use is like the Nerva app. I kid you not, people come back to me time and time again saying they love it. They find so much value in it. And I have no disclosure or anything. I just, it's just a tool, one tool. It's not certainly the only tool, but really helps with people understanding that gut-brain axis is absolutely palpable. And we need to be thinking about that when we are trying to get away from our food restrictions, because it's not just, oh, I know I need to do this. Let me just go add this. Sometimes some people really struggle with that, right? So, there's a little PTSD going on.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. The sort of number one or step one of everything we do is about nervous system regulation, because I think we can be so much more expansive and thus healing with the diets as people are able to tolerate more fibers, more raw vegetables, more phytonutrients. Like they really can't tolerate a lot of that, or if they're in that restricted and fearful mindset of eating. And so even things like fermented food. So I think one of the ways that we can regulate the nervous system, though, is through food. So talk a little bit about your cooking background and how getting people to almost fall in love with enjoying food again, versus being afraid of it, might be so helpful.
Well, that is really a good point in the sense of like bringing that joy back in the kitchen, whether it's just you cooking or maybe you have a small group. Just this morning, we were messaging with our cookbook club, which is one way I find joy in cooking. I mean, I actually grew up not loving cooking. I was kind of forced to do it. It was like expected of me to learn. And even on a school night, they do a little bit of 10, 15 minutes of helping my mom cook. So I didn't love it, but then I knew how to do it. I had the tools. So then I expanded my horizons. Instead of just Indian cooking, it was a lot of other cooking when I was an adult. And that's what kind of had me start enjoying it. And then, of course, I am kind of a foodie. So when you're a foodie and you realize, the apple pie out there tastes terrible compared to your homemade apple pie, then you just eat less apple pie because you're not going to make apple pie all the time. So you become a food snob, and that can be in your favor in some ways because you might end up eating less processed foods and, less of those things. So that's kind of, one thing I think about, that bringing joy, like that's just one tool, but like, but it's not that easy for people that are suffering in the moment with a true gut diagnosis like IBD, UC, Crohn's, SIBO, that's refractory, like, really bad acid reflux. It's not that simple for them to be able to go say, oh yeah, she said, I can go enjoy myself in the kitchen. Well, but I can't eat some of the foods that I'm about to cook. So it's a nuanced approach. And I think those people really need some personalized care, to get to that point.
Absolutely. And I think even going out to eat, there's such social connection with food. A lot of my patients do really struggle with that loss. It's a loss. It's a little bit of grief for a while around kind of not being able to eat just with ease, right? So if you think about these more complicated clients, because we in our community, it's primarily health and wellness professionals. So we're kind of all dealing with the complexity of the overlap between endometriosis, SIBO, resistant SIBO, chronic constipation, struggles with motility that feel really refractory. When you sit down with a client with these multiple layers of complexity, what is your sort of methodology, or how do you organize that kind of complexity?
Getting to the root cause and explaining that can take a long time. That can take a long time, especially SIBO, right? Not always, but sometimes. And then figuring out the biome and its role, what's going on with. So really, I am looking at it from a root cause approach, and I'm looking at the local GI effects, but certainly the integrative approach of the whole body and how it's connected. So I guess I don't know if I can answer that really easily, but because I think it's very complicated. So using some kind of root cause analysis methodology, which is a lot of what we are taught, right, in functional medicine, naturopathic medicine, all those types of modalities, we are looking at the root cause. And some of the other modalities like herbal medicine and Chinese medicine and other cultures of the world are looking at maybe root cause as well, but particularly using nature to help, and using the body's ability, hormesis, and the body's ability to do amazing things that it can do. But we live in this toxic soup, and it's kind of back to what you said in the beginning. Like 20 years ago, we didn't have as much complex illness, and why we have so much now. And I just think that toxic burden and soup, and when I say toxins, I'm not just talking about chemicals, environmental stress, the standard American diet, all those things, sleep, we just, everything keeps adding up. And I don't know that we're doing a lot to stop that and to reverse that from happening. So I think until we address our entire environment and culture, not only our food, then I think we're going to keep seeing some of this complex chronic illness arise.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you're saying, the root cause really is the external environment. So as practitioners, we have to help individuals navigate a system that really none of us have that much control over. So individually, I think that's where some of these tools can be so helpful, empowering a little bit to people who feel kind of stuck in this cycle of chronic illness. So one of the tools is cooking, which we talked about, and I'd like to get into that a little more deeply. But also, before we do that, do you use much functional testing? Is there anything, are there any particular tests or medications, supplements that tend to be really helpful in some of these more chronic cases?
Yeah. So if we're specifically talking about an active gut patient, testing. So there's a lot of different types of biome testing. Dr. Jason Harlock's teachings are really profound. So are Alison Seebecker's and the SIBO community and some of these other, SIBO specific people, but also microbiome specific, and there can be an overlap. So I'm still not yet, there are a lot of tests out there, let's just say. And I think cost comes into play here. So, we can get a little bit of information from things like GI Map, Genova, Gutsumers, et cetera, but then you can get a lot more microbiome information in some of the other ones, like I'm learning more about Tiny Health right now. And they're very helpful. They are very helpful. They're not necessarily game changer tests. I would say I also love the genomic testing, like 3x4. I love it, but I also it's not necessarily a game changer unless you happen to light up high in methylation pathways or the cellular pathways, because then we're like, oh, there's some nutrigenomic things we can actually really do on this patient. And that actually comes into that comment about the environment. The genomics are your genomics, so they're your genes. But again, people like to know that because they kind of like to know what they're dealing with, what are the cards they have, and how can we influence those genes with our lifestyle choices. So again, not a necessary like, oh my God, black and white, you have this is going to be a game changer, but data helps drive behaviors. And for a lot of personalities, not all personalities, some personalities are like, give me the data, but I don't think I'm going to change my ways because I'm content, but majority of people, data is helping them drive some changes. It really is nice to see, which is why sometimes I do lean on functional test kits, even if they are expensive, because then you see that, wow, this person was motivated to make that change on, maybe I will do more prebiotic fibers, in particularly FOS or inulin or GOS or whatever it might be, or maybe I will start eating organic foods because of these tests in my blood, or so those are a couple of examples. And I do think everyone should get a really good basic chemistry panel, not basic, sorry, functional chemistry panel. Like, let's go beyond what the annual physical gives you, because it's nothing, you guys. And so, we got to go beyond that. And so we have a nice little package where we do a very full functional chemistry panel. It gives you a lot of great great baseline information.
Especially about things like nutrient absorption and, just generally, I think that can be really helpful for people to see that, they're just not getting enough nutrition in many cases. Yeah. So, how do you like to really integrate cooking and teaching people how to cook into your gut work? Because, like you said, not everyone really enjoys cooking, and so many people are very busy, but it is so important as a nervous system shifts to help people be really empowered with their food.
Yeah, I meet them where they're at because I have a pretty detailed intake form that asks them about culinary questions alone and then nutrition questions alone and what they want to do, where they're at, what they're interested in. Like we have to meet them where they're at. So if they're out the bat like, hey, Shefaly, I'm going to be eating out 4 nights a week, period. Can you work with me? Yeah, I can. I'll tell you, okay, eat out, and we're going to guide you, myself and the health coach, on choosing wisely, choosing maybe specific restaurants, choosing certain things on the menu, and then at home, if you're not cooking, I'm going to meet you where you're at. I'll tell you where to get it delivered from. These are the different things you might want to consider. Do you do Instacart? Do you not do Instacart? Do you what do you get in Instacart? There's all kinds of amazing meal planning resources out there that are not just restricted to a meal delivery kit, right? There's a lot out there. So I just meet them where they're at there. But if they are, somewhat interested in home cooking and they want to get better at it, we have a Food is Medicine Academy that's part of our practice that all the patients in the practice get access to. People really love that because it's there. What it's there for is like, here, you have access to this, but in your one-on-one sessions with me, I tell you which ones to go listen to, or I give you the cliff notes if there's time for it.
Yeah.
I would say common ones that I see people benefit from are reading labels. Like reading labels is so key and it won't take long. Like maybe get someone like me to take you to the grocery store, do a 1 hour session, or a coach that can walk you through reading the labels, and then understanding oils and fats and non-dairy milks, and really understanding the composition of these things. That's kind of people will always have questions about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you mentioned a few times that you use health coaches in your practice. I would love to learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I was doing it all myself in the beginning, and I really think that coaching is key and instrumental for behavior change. So data and coaching are very, very great at executing a treatment plan. So basically, maybe it's a triad. Maybe I'm the treatment plan person, and then there's the data, which can be like, a DEXA body composition scan and testing and a Whoop, I wear a Whoop, or an Oura Ring, or, all that data. You can get overwhelmed with data. So we don't want to overdo the data. And then the third part of that sort of stool, I think, is a health coach helping you with lifestyle modifications, habit coaching, keeping you accountable. I mean, in the pandemic, I had a fitness trainer, like a personal trainer, because I couldn't go to the gym in the beginning, right? So I found a virtual trainer, and I was really surprised that he told me that he himself had a trainer. And I'm like, oh, you're a personal trainer and you have your own trainer? He's like, yeah, Shefaly, every coach needs a coach. So everybody in these days needs a coach.
Absolutely. I think that's a really important human element that's going to be one of the key drivers forward as medicine becomes more technical and more digital. We do need people to hold us accountable, to help us navigate barriers to change, to, navigate that woman who has had chronic bloating and then she now has a newborn or she has a challenging teenager. Like, we don't have total control over our, just execute step by step. So coaching can be really, really valuable in people actually achieving their goals. So, tell us a little bit before we wrap up about your practice, how you work with people. your favorite kinds of clients?
Okay, so we're at precisionguthealth.com. Again, bridging the gap between, conventional GI and an integrative, more full body systems approach, starting with the gut. And the longer you work with us, if you want to, after our initial sort of intense, 4 to 6 month program, we then usually can move on to working on other things like hormones, perimenopause, adrenals, although we talk about stress from the very beginning, and lipids and cholesterol. I do love lipids. I love lipids because of that family history that I talked about. And that's kind of a little like piece of the pie that I love to always remember. So you can find us at Precision Gut Health on Instagram, TikTok, trying to do a little more consistent social media.
I know, never enough time for all of it.
Yes. And we do have a cool new offering that's a SIBO concierge program. So it's really like meant for hand-holding through your SIBO process and SIBO journey. When you're kind of like, whether you're, already established and dealing with refractory recurrent SIBO, and you're just hearing a lot of things out there about what to do, that's the right person for SIBO concierge. Yeah.
Excellent. So those challenging cases you guys really enjoy. And do you see a lot of your SIBO refractory patients actually end up being diagnosed with endometriosis?
I would say not. No. And you're not the first person to ask me this, because there's a couple of people I partner with that I send patients to that are manual therapists, et cetera, different types. And that is what they primarily see. But, that's because they do that. And so I sometimes have to look for it and be sure that it's not there. And so I'm always asking for them to try to see if we need to get pelvic imaging or whatnot, if they don't have a known diagnosis.
Sure.
In some cases, we know I'm tracking their, entire history and seeing, oh, okay, infertility, endo, things like that. But sometimes it may be hidden.
Right. So sometimes they may have it, but you don't know yet. And when you're seeing them, and then other times it's not related to endo, it's just challenging SIBO.
Yeah, I mean, the root cause list of SIBO is so long, and the common ones are there, but there are a smattering of things like we've found, IgG insufficiency, like as being a root cause for some people. Certainly a lot of other factors that can compound into the SIBO, so not alone, but other factors. So still lots to learn out there, lots that we're just starting to find out. I know DDW was just this last weekend, which is the big GI international conference. I didn't go, but it is a conventional conference. But, it's nice to see what the conventional space is addressing and doing about SIBO and knowing about SIBO as well. Mark Pimentel, is always there and talking about his work. But I also like learning about international communities and what they're doing for SIBO, and what is the rest of the world doing about the microbiome besides just the US.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for those resources. And for anyone who's struggling with SIBO and wants to learn, or any kind of chronic digestive health issue and wants to learn more about culinary medicine, you have your program and offering for that. So thank you so much for being here and sharing with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I love chatting about all these kinds of things. Could go on and on.
Oh, I know. Absolutely. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.